The GovX show is supported by Forrester, helping government organisations perform at their best. Visit forrester.com to learn more.
Hello again, welcome to another episode of the GovX show. I'm Tim Coulthard, your community director here at GovX Digital and regular host of the show that brings you conversations with public sector changemakers. Today we're going to be talking all things GovTech. Do you as a public sector organisation have an ecosystem of innovative startups and suppliers you can reach out to and collaborate with? Because that's very much the future, as you'll hear from Roy Zaban, my guest today. Until recently, Roy was head of Govtech at the Israeli NGO CREATORS and is now a PhD candidate at the Technium, which is the Israeli Institute of Technology. He's an expert in the field. He's worked with multiple government organisations. In fact, he even wrote the open collaboration strategy and policy for the Israeli government. So he's had hands-on experience working in the public sector to build these ecosystems of collaborative, innovative startups and government organisations to really drive the GovTech agenda. You cannot afford to be without the expertise within your organisation now, whether it's in-house or brought in through these kind of partnerships. So Roy's going to talk a bit about that, and then I'll be along at the end to share some information about a couple of on-demand sessions you can catch up with, where we brought GovTech experts from around the UK and overseas together for a conversation exploring how this exciting part of the public sector agenda is developing. That's about it for me for now. I'll introduce you to Roy and be along at the end to join up the conversation around those extra sessions. See you then. So Roy, welcome to the GovX show. It's great to have you here.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
That's our pleasure. Excited to talk to you today about innovation and collaboration in the public sector and how public sector organizations can be doing more to work with startups and innovative solutions providers to drive their progress. So let's start at the beginning with a quick rundown of you and your experience in this space and kind of what you've been doing in your career.
Okay, so I've been leading CREATORS GovTech activities during the past 3.5 years. CREATORS is an NGO who is focused on bringing innovation to underserved ecosystems and working with entrepreneurs to help them reach to those ecosystems. And GovTech was one of the fields that we felt that needs more work and to bring more entrepreneurs since there's a huge potential. The market share of GovTech is expected by $400 billion. That was the estimates for 2021, and it will grow. So we felt that there's a lot of things to do there. And during the past few years, I worked a lot with governments and municipalities, both in Israel and in Europe. I developed a strategy for open innovation for the Israeli government, mentored startups in the GovTech industry, helping them to understand what are their options and how to actually behave, because it's actually different behavior that we know from the private sector when working with public agencies. And also doing some research in the GovTech field, analyzing different programs that work in different places around the world to understand what works better and what's less. And today I'm a researcher at the Technion in Israel. My field of research is digitalization of cities and also understanding how COVID affected digitalization also in this manner. Okay,
so lots there and a really broad experience sort of both sides of the fence, I suppose. So really, it's great to be able to unpack some of this with you. And I suppose if we start at the beginning here, talking about open innovation and this sort of new spirit of collaboration between sort of private sector, startups and innovators and public sector, what are the key principles and concepts behind that in terms of how it works, how it can happen for you?
Okay, so open innovation, I think it's the leading approach today, both in private and public sectors, to deal with technology and with innovation in the organization. It starts from the understanding that an organization cannot answer and fix all of its problems. And there could be a technological or maybe other knowledge that could come from the outside, and we can use it. Usually it is more efficient, it's less expensive compared to something that you will do inside your company, and the maintenance also is not part of the headache that usually comes with technological products. So after a company analyzes that and understands that, and this is a really good strategy, they go outside and to find solutions for problems that they have. And that's where open innovation starts. So it's bringing something from outside the organization and implementing it inside the organization. That there are three key principles. It's the identification, finding the right solution, and implementation of it. And each one of these components has a lot to work with. I can say that the easiest part, that usually people think that's the hardest part, is to find a solution. That's the most easiest part. The hardest part is actually to define what you're looking for. And I think that there's a lot of progress in that. Usually organizations look before for solutions, and today they're for products, and today they're looking for solutions for their challenges. They're not there, saying, I need this kind of app. They're saying, my problem is, and starting from that point. And then implementation is also very difficult because we're actually bringing something that is not our core business or people in our organization, and we need to understand how it works together, how our employees use it, what are our expectations when working with kind of company that is much more faster and innovative than usually in these kinds of units. So all this process is things that came into the public sector, I think, like 3-4 years ago, and is very developing right now in many places around the world.
Okay, and so let's talk about some of the key principles of or foundations of why this is a good idea, why it's growing, why more public sector organizations and government should be doing it. What are the advantages for a government organization in terms of approaching a more collaborative, innovative relationship with private sector innovators?
So I think that the first place, if you work correctly with open innovation, you take like the stone off your back that says, I need to know what's the solution for everything. Technology is evolving rapidly, and it's very, very complicated to follow everything and understand exactly what are your options. So I think that if you work with open innovation correctly, you do what you're best with, and this is defining your problems. Public sector officials know their daily job. They know what kind of problems they have in their organization. And if they define that well, then a lot of solutions can come in, and you're not responsible for actually thinking about the solution, about the technology, about everything that's behind that. And it's someone else that it's their expertise to actually bring it into your organization. So this is one thing. The second thing is working with open innovation brings a lot of new opportunities, a lot of new products that usually are more expensive, take a lot of time, a lot of bureaucracy. So there's a lot of efficiency around that. So that's also keeps public organizations up to date, and they can give the best service to their citizens. Another thing is the educational part. When we try to educate our employees with innovation practices, so the best thing, at least in my point of view, is the experience, is actually working on a real challenge with a real product, working with a company that comes from the private sector. There's a lot of experience gained in that, a lot of learning about innovation, about implementation, how to work with technology, how to use it. And I think that's like worth hundreds of courses that people are taught in different ways, or even having no experience. So this is a really good way to build capacity of innovation inside the organization, which is very, very important, because if you don't have the people who understand how to manage technology and how it could benefit it, so open innovation will not help you. So this is a process. It's a process that is working in parallel. And once you have a company that's working with your agency, so also your employees benefit a lot from that, and they can move on for the next project that will look totally differently after that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that the growth is on both sides. So it's not just hiring in expertise temporarily. You're also then trying to embed some of that understanding and way of working, so that when the partner goes on to do something else, actually some of that learning has been embedded, and the capability of the organization has improved as a result of that interaction and that relationship.
Yeah, so on the one hand, we want to outsource and bring external innovation to our organization, but on the other hand, we want the people who will know how to manage this process and to teach these startups or companies how to work with the public sector. So for that, we need to gain some experience. Yeah,
it's that two-way exchange of, this is how we do things, this is how we do things, and then everybody works better, more efficiently the next time around, I guess. What is interesting about that sort of government learning piece, because I'm curious to know, in your experience, what stops organizations, government organizations, public sector organizations, from taking this more collaborative, open innovation approach? What holds them back, and how can they overcome that to get started?
So I think that in the first place is that people are afraid that technology will replace them. They're working today, they have their job, and no one wants to lose their job in technology and find themselves irrelevant for their organization. So this is the first fear. You never know what technology can bring. It usually, for a lot of employers and employees too, both, it's like this it's a big word that it's very difficult to understand what's its capabilities. So this is the first thing. Although there was a survey last year in the US and local government that one of the most, I think, interesting things that came out of it, that 75% of people who use new technology in local governments felt more productive, more reliable, felt better. So I think that this is not the case. People are afraid, but actually after you measure it, you see that we get a different picture. The second thing is they're afraid from procurement processes that are very complex. It can take a lot of time, and starting with this process, you never know where it ends, and which kind of companies will be part of the procurement. And it could take, you want to start right now, but you'll receive the solution after 2 years, because this is time, this is bureaucracy in government. So starting with innovation and starting with working with companies is very, very difficult in this manner. You want to start something in a few months, and then it takes time. And then you start to define what you're actually looking for, and then the tender goes out. So today there's a lot of things to deal with that, but I think that this is part of the way that's holding back people. And I think also another thing is that a lot of times people don't have the network or connections to people in the technological ecosystem. They don't know to whom they need to approach. They don't know how do these people look like, where do they work, how to talk with them, because they're in the public sector, they have their daily job, and now someone requests them to find out what's going on in the ecosystem, and they don't have these kinds of networks. That sometimes for us, it's things that we live, we're part of something. Governments a lot of time are isolated from all this development, which private sector big companies today are much more in the ecosystem, part of it, looking for it, and governments are a little bit back. So starting this kind of process, like going beyond the darkness and of technology. So also, the basic thing of meeting people is something that could be very difficult to start building from scratch. So I think that these are the main reasons. And I think that the way to overcome them is, I think there are two things. First of all, is to build a program. I think we'll talk about maybe later about some programs, but building a program in the government is actually doing something systematic, organized, that takes the whole process from defining something until implementation, and it helps people to be part of it. You don't need to invent the wheel. You don't need to do it by yourself. You have your people who guide you. You have support. You have people who streamline procurement processes. And once you have this kind of program inside your agency, government, municipality, whatever, it makes things much more easier for someone to say, hey, I want to implement technology. I want to take something and try to use it. I want to pilot with a company that looks interesting to me. So once you have this process, is much more easier. And the second thing is being part of an ecosystem. Also informal, formal meetings, going to meetups, even these basic stuff, letting to know the people, knowing, so they will know that you're interested in something. They know that you'll actually exist. They know what the government is looking for, what's their pains. Even these small things, creating a community that talks about GovTech could be very, very important to start building these kind of basic relationships between people that could afterwards maybe change into something that is actually implementing a product. So this is the second thing. And there's an additional one more thing is that I think that in many processes, innovation processes that we do in companies and also in governments, there's this innovation manager who takes things and works from starting to end, and he's managing it by himself. And I think that one of the things is also to take all the employees that are relevant for this project together with you, and don't be the innovation manager who does things by themselves. Like, let them know that they're part. Let them be part of this. Listen to what they have to, what they can say. Learn from their experience, because at the end, they're the most experienced people in the field that we're looking solutions for. And I think that once they're also part of it, it makes them want to bring innovation. It's not frightening as it sounds, and they understand that they're a crucial part of actually taking your organization forward.
Yeah, and I think what we've been hearing in a lot of conversations is that you talk about that structural piece of sort of slow procurement and so on. The last year with the pandemic, it forced a lot of things to happen much quicker than they would have done otherwise. Government organizations pivoting to digital provision of services rather than sort of face to face and stuff. So maybe one good thing that might come out of that is that there's a more agile, direct approach to procurement and design and delivery of services that hopefully might stick. I know a lot of the leaders we've spoken to said they really want to maintain that pace of change because it's kind of refreshing and ultimately it delivers better outcomes for citizens quicker. So fingers crossed that maybe some of those historic, sort of culture clashes of private and public sector might start to sort of be eroded. We can hope so anyway. I'm interested in finding out a bit more about what's going on out there right now in terms of any particularly interesting projects where collaboration between sort of private sector innovators and government have really delivered results. Are there any particular projects or any particular countries where you feel these guys are really ahead and other organizations and other countries should be looking to them to learn from them?
Okay, so first of all, I can say that I think that all the issue of GovTech programs or smart city programs as an organizing theme for bringing open innovation into public agencies started like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's something pretty new. Most of the programs today that manage for governments, for cities, the relationship with startups and the implementation of technology didn't exist back in like 2015. So it's something pretty new. So the field is also learning from itself, and there's a lot of knowledge that it needs to be still discovered. But we see already some really amazing things that are happening. So there are over 20 programs operating around the world, and like every 2 months there's a new one, new country who's coming into this to this part and wants to take part in the GovTech ecosystem and bring stars, because everyone understands, and this is also before the pandemic. After the pandemic, I think that we'll see much more than that. The technology is a must, and when we're talking about GovTech connections, so there's a lot of projects from a lot of different fields. We can see, for example, GovTech Catalyst in the UK that brought Oxentech for solving problems with firefighters. They're giving them real-time data in emergency cases so that they can have decision-making pretty quick and understand where there's a lot of uncertainties and there are things that are not clear enough, and it's actually saving lives of people. In one of our programs with the German municipality named Bochum, they had a problem that they wanted to bring people to their city center for the shops to maintain small and medium businesses so they won't close, especially during the pandemic, but also before that. And they gathered with an Israeli-based startup named Plaisance, who give them data about people, where they're moving, and of course, according to the GDPR, and what kind of stores are more interesting to them. And it gives them actually data to understand how they can make their city much more friendly for people and also for their businesses, because at the end, businesses is like the essentials for every city to live. So this comes from local governance and working with businesses. And I can give you another example that came from San Francisco. The department, the child agency department that partnered with startup Binti that helps them streamline the adoption of children, who was very bureaucracy and took a lot of time. And they have a user-friendly app that now takes, I think, 50% time less to approve each request, and save between 20 to 40% of the employee's time dealing with these kinds of requests. So it's not small things. Actually, life-changing things that people are working on, and we see how these kinds of technologies come inside. And more time for social workers is more time for the people. More businesses is more money for investment in the city, and firefighters, it's people actual real lives. So broad issues, a lot of different things, but they all have great impact. And it's not only the impact, it's also the potential of scaling. Because if I have a good solution for firefighters in the UK, it could be also relevant for the firefighters in Germany, in Japan, in the US, everywhere, same as for all the other examples that I gave. So when we're looking at, at the private sector, so it's always competitive. If I'm a startup and I'm working with one company, sometimes it will be difficult to move to another company if they're competing and if they're in the same industry. When we're in the public sector, we don't have this competition. If I have something that works good in Israel, why shouldn't Germany, France, the UK use it as well? The option to share and bring good startups into more countries, more cities, is much more easier. So, and it's a very good incentive for startups to grow. Every startup that wants to scale could just take their solution and usually just replicate it to other places. Sometimes different regulations have different constraints, but as a concept, it works really well. I remember that one of the CEOs in the Israeli municipality told me that they have a WhatsApp group of all the CEOs of the municipalities, and each time someone had a good pilot with a startup that is relevant, they just write, okay, look, this company was really good. This is we had a pilot, it worked really well. This is the outcomes, and then the startup CEO starts to get phone calls. We want also to see, because there is no competition, people are more welcome to share this kind of information. So so a lot of things are happening in this field, and there's also a lot of opportunities for startups to go from place to place. When I'm looking about countries that are leading, I think the GovTech scene and implementation and working with startups. So I think that the leading ones would be the UK Catalyst program, the government, CivTech from Scotland, and also the Polish program, which all run by governments, and also Startup in Residence that is led from the US, led by City Possible, City Innovate, which is a private company. That they all help startups work pretty fast with the government. They all streamline procurement processes, make them easier, and they gave all the information for each startup at the time that is according to its need and according to its stage. And they are challenge-based programs. Most of the programs that we see today are challenge-based, but these ones have a lot of work on their challenges. They bring the exact problem that is needed for solution, and you can start a process inside these programs and finish it after a few months, by a year, with the contract, or it's actually something for the long term. And this is very important for startups, especially in GovTech, that they need their funding. They need to start with something. They can't wait 2 years until the tender will end. And once you have a simple procurement process and and there's transparency, and they understand what they're actually receiving and how much time it will take. So it makes these programs very, very relevant, and take these countries to lead GovTech activities and participation of startups from not only from their countries, from all over Europe and North America.
I mean, so much going on. It's such an exciting space to be in right now, and I think that spirit of collaboration is key. That the learning is shared on both sides, whether that's a startup, sharing with colleagues, or whether that's the government sort of sharing, some of their success stories. And that's I guess what we're trying to communicate here is that collaborative spirit's key to building and scaling this. So it's great to hear that that's sort of happening right now. For an organization in the public sector, as you said, there are some things that they may not be aware of what's out there. They may not be aware of how to work them. How can they get started down this road? I mean, is there a sort of a type of project or a type of approach to take initially before testing the water and scaling further?
So I think, first of all, learn from other people. There's all great people in the government that lead these kinds of initiatives, and they have a lot of knowledge and they learn from their experience, and you don't need to invent the wheel. You need to find the right formula for your government or your city and your expectations. But at the end, the structures are very similar, and going to another person and learning from his experience can save a lot of time. The second thing is to start from the easiest parts, easiest challenges. Don't go, for the biggest challenge of your organization, because you'll probably fail. Start with something a little simple, and once you succeed there, it'll be easier to move on to bigger issues. The third thing is people. At the end, everything is people. You need to find the right people to work with. That's also part of it, identifying the challenge that you will work with. Which people could actually manage that. They're agile enough, they're open-minded, they want to cooperate with you or not. And also the solution that you will select, the startup, the people and the interaction is very, very important. So taking a problem that's not big with people that you can work with. And at the end also, you can read our report. I think that will give you a lot of information. We also build at the end a section, actually how to start, what actually people can do to start their own program or this kind of initiative. And they should know that there's a lot of people who are working in their government in this field. And my main message is you don't need to invent the wheel. It's setting your objectives. It's more education, it's more implementation, what you're looking for. And then according to that, finding the way to make it happen according to a few simple stages and starting from the easiest part.
Good stuff. Let's name check your report to give it its credit, and then we'll link in the show notes as well. So what's the report called?
So the report called GovTech report, innovation in the public sector. We analyzed over 15 programs running in governments and municipalities that have they're dealing with open innovation. We studied their structure and actually analyzed what kind of stages they have, how they deal with procurement, how they deal with with building challenges, what kind of benefits they give to startups that participate in there. We give some actual real examples to understand what kind of startups are actually coming to to these projects. So we try to give a comprehensive view of things how it works today, and if you want to start your own program, your own government, how you could actually do that by yourself, or what are the things that you should think about when you start, what's important and what could wait for the next stage.
Great. Sounds like a good place to start for any public sector organization. So we'll put a link so that people can get stuck into that and start learning how it goes. Before we wrap it up, I'm curious about and I always ask this question of people in different sectors, and it's sometimes a little unfair, but what's coming next down the horizon in terms of developments and progress in terms of GovTech and how organizations collaborate together? It might be a little unfair, but what are your thoughts on where we might be going next?
So I think that, if we had this conversation before the pandemic, maybe my answers would be a bit different. But I think that, first of all, this industry will go forward. The pandemic pushed it, like 10 years ahead. We always, before the pandemic, we always talked about the necessity of technology in governments, in the public sector. But and everyone said, yeah, of course, you're right. But then the pandemic came and everyone understood that it is a necessity. And governments that were more digitalized had, I think, a better understanding about about the pandemic, gave services also during lockdowns. And people understood that it's a necessity. It's a real necessity. It's not only like saying that in conferences and in discussions and lectures, it's a real necessity. So I think only this event pushes the industry a few years ahead. Also, when we look at fundings and merges in the GovTech industry, we see a rapid growth from 2016 till today, 300% of growth in funding. So it's going there, and governments are getting more and more open. I think that the main trends that we'll see are three. First of all, movement to the cloud. A lot of governments and municipalities are not still yet there will move to the cloud because it opens a lot of opportunities. You can work with a lot of products and softwares that today are problematic to work with because startups are not building their products that are not on cloud. So it will change the whole opportunities and options for governments. Israel, I think a week ago, just finished their tender. We have Amazon and Google who won the tender for building the national government cloud service. And now we're talking about a real change that will be like in 2 or 3 years from today. So I think that we'll see this movement. And also surveys that were conducted during the pandemic showed that local governments are moving more and more to the cloud because they know now what are the capabilities, especially when you have remote work and people. I don't know if they will come, maybe not after the pandemic to work 5 days a week from their office. It will push that further. The second thing is more analytics for decision making. I think that that's what we learned from the pandemic. There's a lot of data that could be used, and there's a lot of need for analysis of the data, especially when we're talking about IoT that will grow in the next 5 years dramatically. There's a lot of data. Part of it is public data that will need to be analyzed and could be used for a lot of things, for prediction, for management of cities and countries, for many highlights that could benefit and understand what kind of strategies countries and cities should use when providing services. And the third thing is moving to more citizen-centric services. I think that municipalities and governments will look for products that could help them be more accurate with citizens, deliver them services in shorter times, and actually giving an experience like with an advanced private company that gives us insurance savings services, financial services, or other things. So people will understand that they could also have high expectations from the government because when we talk about private innovation in the private sector, it's always clear why organizations need an innovation, because otherwise they will die. The competition will kill them. And governments don't have competition. There is no another government in Israel. There's only one. But I think that, but they have to innovate, because if they won't innovate, it will harm democracy, transparency, and could actually, at the end, lead to very undesirable things, or maybe a chaos. Because if people won't get paid by their national insurance at time, they need this basic money. If people won't get, deliver services by their social worker, it affects their welfare from day one. So we don't have this privilege to see if the competition, or if there's another company that will give a better service. And that's why governments will have and are today innovating. So I think that these three trends are also aligned with that governments understand that they need to give services that are more focused on the citizens, more transparency, and better tools for decision-making in real time. I think that the thing in my hand is very important to say that innovation is a necessity, and you don't need to be afraid of it. If you're working in the public sector, you know what you're doing, and you know your job pretty well. And now you need to understand, and you know where are your pains. So just say, hi, I'm from government X. This is my pain. And from this point, everything will start moving, and people will come to here, because there's a financial potential in GovTech. There's a lot of data in GovTech. There's a lot of countries around the world who are looking for the same services. So you're in good hands, and just need to streamline this process and make it easier. But the responsibility is on the governments. Startups could, have amazing products and build amazing things, but if the government is not open for that, it won't help. So it starts from the government, and once there will be 100, 200, 300 people in the government that will say, this is my problem and I'm open for solutions, they will find out that there is an audience who are waiting for them and really want to work with them.
So there we have it. Thanks again to Roy Zaban for joining me for that conversation. Is your organisation thinking along the same lines? Open, collaborative, innovative, welcoming partnerships from that startup ecosystem? If not, probably time to think again. As I said, we've run a couple of sessions around this at our recent conference, and I'd like to highlight one in particular, which is called Government as a Startup Accelerator. It's not enough to just leave the customer-supplier relationship in place in terms of technology. Government organisations need to be driving and working with the private sector to develop innovative new solutions. I'm going to put a link in the show notes attached to this episode so you can check out that session for yourself. Great panel with international perspectives from Brazil, UK, Israel, Spain, so well worth checking out. That's about it for this episode. I'll be along soon with another conversation with a public sector changemaker. But until then, goodbye.